En el centro de la pampa vive un pimiento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento. Sol y viento.
Hello, I'm Patrick Barnard. Welcome to the 68th edition of the Pimento Report. Today, we're going to the Argo Bookstore where there's going to be a book launching of this book. It's called The Great Revenue Robbery, and it's all about this crucial social issue of taxation. Here we are on a small street called Towers Street in downtown Montreal, walking to the Argo Bookstore. Going to Argo this Thursday night. It's interesting to think this isn't going to be a book launching of a book of poetry. This is going to be an evening dedicated to a book about taxes. Why is that so? Because there's a worldwide movement now to bring some justice, some equity to tax systems everywhere. The book, The Great Revenue Robbery, was produced for the Canadians for Tax Fairness, and its executive director, Dennis Howlett, the editor of the book, Richard Swift. Coming up to the corner of Towers Street in St. Catherine, walking on the way to Argo Books for this opening tonight of the book about taxes and taxation. Richard Swift is an internationally known social activist and journalist specializing in social issues. And we're coming into Argo. Ah, yes. Here we come in. Hello, JP. How are you?
Very good.
Are you waiting for the crowd? You are, aren't you? How many do you think will be? My goodness, you've got seats.
You don't have to.
It looks like a church.
If they all come in, where would they sit?
Argo is packed. And before the event begins, I'm able to talk to editor Richard Swift and Dennis Howlett of Canadians for Tax Fairness. Richard Swift, you edited this book. I got out of it that really three things are required: that wealthier people really should contribute more, that corporate taxation rates, which have plummeted, should be brought up again, and that we need an international transaction tax. Is that basically the three-part message of the book, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the book does is it provides, in a sort of popularized way, a context for people to understand tax policy. This context, those three things come out of that context, but there's other things as well. How to build a social economy and the connection to how you could use the tax system to help the cooperative sector. How you can use the tax system to ameliorate ecological damage, particularly with the carbon tax. And also how you can track down the wealth that is escaping the tax system, going to tax shelters, which has become a huge problem, and billions and billions of dollars of money that should be taxable is being salted away by Canadian wealthy people in tax shelters. So all those things play into the three you're talking about. There's also things like the fact that there's no inheritance tax in Canada, that capital gains are taxed at half the rate that other incomes taxed at. So there's a whole range of different areas.
What do you think is the most important thing about this book?
Well, it's trying to look at the tax issue from a different, more progressive perspective. Too long, the tax cut issue has been captured by the right wing, and we need to show how important taxes are. Anybody who's concerned about health, education, poverty reduction, the environment, has to realize that we can't really fix these. We can't rebuild Canada unless we also talk about tax fairness.
After the Second World War, marginal rates for very wealthy people were extremely high compared to what they are now, and yet after World War II, the North American economies had their best period of growth. So there seems to be nothing to this idea that tax cuts for the rich actually give benefits to the society as a whole. Are there other myths that you puncture in this book?
Another myth we puncture is that tax cuts for corporations is going to help kickstart the economy. It's been proven that it hasn't worked. They've just sat on their money, they haven't invested it, and we're left with a huge deficit that is being dealt with by cutting severely to public services and public servants' jobs.
Don't we really need to reverse the history of the last 30 years and start taxing those people who benefit egregiously from our system, getting them to pay back a bit, since they benefit enormously, disproportionately?
Taxes are a good way to deal with the growing inequality between rich and poor. The big gap in inequality is not healthy for the economy. It means ordinary people don't have the money to be good consumers and get the economy going.
I think that's what the book does. It makes it says basically what Dennis was saying before, that we're on a bad road to an extremely unequal society, and that there's all kinds of implications that fall from that. That the commons, which is supported through the tax system, is being eaten away and destroyed. That the kinds of rights that poorer people, disenfranchised people should enjoy are being undermined as the capacity of the government to provide any kind of social service falls by the wayside. So all those things are true.
We've actually seen a change in public opinion. Now a majority of Canadians support increasing taxes on the wealthy, and even modest increases they're willing to pay in order to ensure a quality health care, education, and other public services.
But fairness is the crux of all this, isn't it?
That's right.
Now, this is a first for Argo Books, as far as I know. You know, usually there are poets speaking here. Do you feel happy to be here at Argo with Jack Kerouac and Walt Whitman just over your right shoulder?
Well, I think, the poet and the populist are often hand in hand, and I think tax justice is a cause for both.
In conditions like the ones that we're in right now, what happens is that very wealthy people and corporations withhold liquidity, and that would make regressive taxation even worse, since it would compound the situation that we're in. Do you think you could make the argument that higher taxes for corporations and individuals would actually help us deal with this present situation?
Higher taxes on the wealthy does make sense, because we've seen that trickle-down economics doesn't work. And even the theory that, if the rich have a lot of money, they'll invest it, well, that doesn't work now either, because less and less investment is going into job-creating productive investment. More and more is going to speculative investments, or even being hidden away in tax havens. So we need a new fair taxation system that would redistribute the wealth, and that could help get the economy going again.
People are getting a little aggravated about taxes, particularly about the tax haven issue, and they're saying now that there's $170 billion of Canadian funds in 12 tax havens around the world, which could easily wipe out the deficit, and we wouldn't have to have the austerity policies.
So cumulatively, even before we hit the 2008 global financial crisis, we were on our way to a deficit. They very quickly turned a big surplus into a deficit, and then with the spending that they were forced to do on as a result of the economic downturn, that created a bigger deficit. And so last year was really the first year they brought in a real austerity budget, where there were serious cutbacks in public services, in public servants' jobs, and there included in that was an attack on our old age security system, on employment insurance, and on Medicare.
Thank you for doing this book. I think it's a good contribution to something that has to be talked about in Canada. I work in the healthcare field, and when I look at some of the things, and across Canada, just in terms of what we've lost in taxes, I can't remember the exact number of years, but it was maybe an 8-year period. $170 billion was left on the table, both provincially and federally in terms of dollars, which is outrageous.
Topic of enforcement, does the CRA or other national tax authorities have the legal means to repatriate all that money sitting in offshore accounts?
Well, there are a couple of problems. One is that the Canada Revenue Agency is severely understaffed. And
They just cut in the most recent budget, even though they claimed they were going after tax savings. They cut the Canadian tax.
so they lost 3,000 staff. You haven't had a question
Well,
yet.
I mean, on that point about fairness, I think you said at the outset that you were kind of surprised at the amount of, attention that you've been getting, and I think it's because people have been hungry for this. People know intuitively there's something wrong with the way things are operating, but trying to figure out what the target is or exactly what the problem is tough for folks who are going to work every day and don't have the background or don't know what the tax code says. So I think it's an absolute breath of fresh air and a really critical development.
Well, did you know that your tax dollar is going to subsidize the tickets of people in the corporate boxes at professional sports games? They get to claim a tax credit for tickets to sports games. And technically, they're supposed to be conducting business, but almost in every case they're not. They're having a few drinks and enjoying the game. And one of the eminent tax law professors at Osgood Law School said there was more tax fraud going on at one Blue Jays game in Toronto than a whole year of welfare fraud in Ontario.
I wanted to say a word about the frame around inequality and fairness, because inequality in fact kills. And in Montreal, people living in Hochelaga-Maisonneuve have a 10-year lesser life expectancy than people on the west side of Montreal. And to me, that's a very, very vivid illustration of the social effects of inequality. So I'm very glad to know that some of the very best brains in the country will be getting together next week to think about how to sort of further develop this frame, because I think it's very, very necessary.
The speaker at Argo Bookshop is referring to what will be known as the Tax Justice Roundtable. It will take place on Wednesday, May 29th, 2013 at McGill University. There, Canadians for Tax Fairness and the McGill Faculty of Law in the law school will hold this roundtable. It will be open to the public, but also you can watch it on a webcast if you cannot go there in person. How's your book been doing with sales?
Our book has actually sold out its first printing. So they're doing another printing.
How long did that take?
Just a month.
So this is a first for Argo Books. There's been poetry readings here, but I think this is the first time that they've had something on economics and certainly on taxes. What do you think?
I think it's a very important book. I think as a society, we suffer from tax avoidance and tax evasion, and I think it's an issue whose time has come. Like the fact that they're standing room only here indicates to me that there's definitely interest in the population about this issue, and I think if they keep spreading the good word, we might actually see real action at some point in the future. And it's critical to the future of our nation that we get this tax revenue that funds the programs that make our country run.
I can't help asking you, you use the letters CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency. I have a feeling you've been thinking about these issues for some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I work in the payments business, and I think a lot of the tools that are used to attack money laundering and financial crime could be leveraged to accomplish the goal of repatriating a lot of this money that's stuck overseas. So groups like the Financial Action Task Force, the Edgemont Group, these guys have devised legal tools that are used all around the world by financial intelligence units to track down people perpetrating economic crime, and tax evasion and money laundering go hand in hand. So I think there's definite synergies that could be leveraged very effectively. So that's about it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.